So today we are going to discuss a little more about the Kyoto Protocol and the clean development mechanism, so that we can get a very clear idea on the carbon trading market internationally, how this is happening, and how strong or weak is this market. So some background of the Kyoto Protocol. Uh, this Kyoto Protocol of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change came in 1998, and so the Article 12 of this Kyoto Protocol, it says that a clean development mechanism is defined as follows, and the purpose of the clean development mechanism shall be to assist parties not included in Annex 1 in achieving sustainable development and in contributing to ultimate objective of the convention, and to assist parties included in Annex 1 in achieving compliance with their quantified emission limitation and reduction commitments under Article 3. So basically it says that you can simplify the countries in two categories. One is that some countries would be contributing to achieving these targets, and their pollution level is very high, and they won't be able to do that immediately. So they have a target, but I will also show you like which countries set a target to reduce how much of pollution, but they would be doing achieving also by paying to others in this carbon reduction. So under the clean development mechanism, parties not included in Annex 1 will benefit from project activities, basically the developing countries, resulting in certified emission reduction, CER. This abbreviation is used frequently, certified emission reductions. That the example that we had discussed for Indore project, there or wherever you do a project, you have to produce these certified emission reductions. And parties included in Annex 1 may use the certified emission reductions occurring from such project activities to contribute to compliance with part of their quantified emission limitation and reduction commitments under Article 3 as determined by a conference of the parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to this protocol. So the technical things. So in simple terms, you can say that some countries would help, and some other countries, especially the developing countries, would get these certified emissions, and the rich countries would make such payments. And this is the Kyoto Protocol. It is an international treaty which extends the 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and it commits state parties to reduce greenhouse gas emissions based on scientific consensus that global warming is occurring and that human-made CO2 emissions are driving it. So you should know the background of the Kyoto Protocol. So this has like universal acceptance that okay, global warming is happening and humans are the responsible for this. And Kyoto Protocol was adopted in Kyoto, Japan on 11th December 1997. It came into force on 16th February 2005, and there are 192 parties, basically because Canada withdrew from this. So now there are 192 parties to this protocol. Then some developments, how this Kyoto Protocol came, and before the Kyoto Protocol, what all things had happened in 1992. In fact, you can go back also up to like the Brundtland Commission or the United Nations World Conference on Environment and Development, which is known as Brundtland Commission. And so the 1992, in 1992, the UN Conference on Environment and Development is held in Rio de Janeiro. It results in the Framework Convention on Climate Change, among other agreements. So that setup of the UNFCCC happens, okay, after this, and that IPCC, all that comes from this UNFCCC. And then we have in 1995, we see that parties to UNFCCC meet in Berlin and to outline the specific targets on emission. Okay, that pollution is already high, and we all need to make a commitment to reduce this emission. And in 1997, in December, the parties conclude the Kyoto Protocol in Kyoto, Japan, in which they agree to the broad outlines of the emission targets. And then Russia and Canada ratified the Kyoto Protocol to the UNFCCC, and that's how the treaty comes into effect from February 16, 2005. And then Canada became the first signatory to announce its withdrawal from Kyoto Protocol in 2011. And then in 2012, the first commitment period under Kyoto Protocol expired. And then in Kyoto Protocol, we see these are the gases covered, greenhouse gases covered under Kyoto Protocol: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, and then perfluorocarbons, sulfur, hexafluoride. So these are the gases, greenhouse gases, on which the targets were set for the countries to basically reduce the carbon, reduce this level of emission. And for each country's targets were different also. Yeah, these are the targets that we see. The carbon reductions announced by actually different countries, quantified emission limitations on reduction commitments in different percentages. So you see that all developed countries had made some commitments to reduce the level of pollution by a different level. Australia by 108%, Australia 92%, Canada 94%, then France 92%, Greece 92%, United States of America 93%, UK 92%, Switzerland 92%. So like this, so different countries basically announced to bring down the level of pollution. And yeah, so these are the targets set by different countries. And then the developing countries were exempted, such as Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Although they are major developing countries, they were exempted because the commitment was only made by the developed countries to reduce the level of emissions. And the sectors that the Kyoto Protocol covered are energy, and that includes fuel combustion, energy industries, manufacturing, transport, and others. Then fugitive emissions from fuels, solid fuels, oil, natural gases, and others. Industrial process, minerals, chemical, metal, and the consumption of different gases. Then solvent and other products. Then agriculture, manure management, rice cultivation, and agriculture soils, prescribed burning of savannas, and then field burning of agricultural residues. So it's not that these are sector specific. Basically it includes almost all sectors: energy, industry, agriculture, waste management, solid waste disposal on land, wastewater handling, waste incineration, and so on. So those are the countries targets, and then the sectors covered. Okay. And then the principles adopted in Kyoto Protocol is that we have common but differentiated responsibilities. So we say that because we all want to reduce the emission, but we see that targets are different, and again developing countries have been exempted from the targets. And then individual countries have different capabilities in combating climate change or into economic development. And this puts obligation to reduce current emission on developed countries on the basis that they are historically responsible for the current levels of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. in fact, that is also the reason why the developed countries protest sometimes, or they don't comply with the announcement that they had or commitments they had done. Because the developed countries say, okay, we have polluted, that is all fine, but then the developing countries are equally polluting. So they should also have some level of commitments. And developing countries are saying that no, your level of emission is so high, it's almost 10 times. So then we are not comparable. So first you should make commitments. So like this, you see that no, Canada withdrew, even America also withdrew, and when um, recently when Donald Trump was also, he had announced that actually will not be party to any kind of even climate change deals. So the developed countries do not show any commitment also, and then who have already contributed historically and also currently also they are contributing significantly. So that's how we see that not much serious actions are taken. So if you divide all the countries into different groups, these are the member countries colored in different colors. So the green color, there is Australia. It shows that Annex B parties with binding targets in the second period. Then we see again parties with binding targets in the first period, but not in the second period. And then the purple color, and then maximum developing countries, basically in the south, are the countries without any binding targets. Okay? They're signatory of Kyoto Protocol, but they don't have any pressure to do anything. And then yellow color countries are having binding targets in the first period, but withdrew from the protocol in the second period. And then yellow countries are also okay, deep no yellow, you can see signatories to the protocol that have not ratified. And then red color countries are other UN member states and observers that are not party to the Kyoto Protocol. So, no, so here you can see that at present there are very few countries who are making commitments to this. Of course, European Union is doing something that we will see. And so coming to the first phase and second phase, since we said that first phase and second phase, so up to 2012, we had the first phase of the Kyoto Protocol, and all 36 countries that fully participated in the first commitment period complied with the protocol. However, 9 countries had to resort to the flexibility mechanisms by funding emission reductions in other countries because their national emissions were slightly greater than their targets. So this is where actually the trading is possible, that they cannot achieve their own targets, and that is why they are taking help of other countries, or they are trying to achieve this target through other countries. And the financial crisis of 2007 and 8 helped reduce the emission, and just like this present COVID-19 crisis helped us significantly reducing the pollution in most of the countries. And then the greatest emission reductions were seen in the former Eastern Bloc countries because of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and it reduced their emission in the early 90s because it might have impacted their industrial base significantly. And even though 36 developed countries reduced their emissions, the global emissions increased by 32% from between 1990 and 2010. So some countries attempted to reduce the emission, but global emission has gone up significantly. And in the second phase, after 2012, basically agreed in 2012, known as Doha Amendment to the Kyoto Protocol, 37 countries have the binding targets. So the first one had 36 countries binding targets, and 37 countries in the second phase had the binding targets. And it included Australia, the European Union, which included 28 countries. And then we had Belarus, Iceland, Kazakhstan, Liechtenstein, Norway, Switzerland, and Ukraine. And then we see that Belarus, Kazakhstan, Ukraine have stated that they may withdraw from Kyoto Protocol or not put into legal force the amendment with second round targets. So you must be aware that actually when we make such a commitment at international level, the members go back to their own countries and then they have to make legislations and accordingly they have to take action. So many times many countries fail to achieve these targets. And then Japan, New Zealand, Russia have participated in Kyoto's first round but have not taken new targets in the second commitment period. And other developed countries without second round targets are Canada and the United States. Okay, so these are major contributors in fact, but they did not have any target. And so ultimately we can see that only in the European Union we see that some commitment is shown. And as of October 2020, 147 states have accepted the Doha Amendment, and it would have entered into force as on 31st December 2020, following its acceptance by 144 countries. And of 37 parties with binding commitments, 34 only have ratified. So this is the situation of the Doha, the Kyoto Protocol. And coming to the Paris Agreement, which happened recently, negotiations were held in the framework of the yearly UNFCCC climate change conferences on measures to be taken after the second commitment period that ends in 2020. And this resulted in the 2015 adoption of Paris Agreement, which is a separate instrument under the UNFCCC rather than an amendment of the Kyoto Protocol. So the time period of Kyoto Protocol is getting over in 2020, and the new agreement, that is Paris Agreement, should come into force from 2020. Okay. But this COVID-19 has, of course, changed the things. And so we see that there are three flexible mechanisms under Kyoto Protocol. We had international emission treaty, joint implementation, clean development mechanism, and so CDM, that clean development mechanism, is the most successful of three flexible mechanisms because that is only existing. And coming to its operationalizations, we have to basically qualify for accreditation of the projects. Okay. So to qualify for accreditation, the project developers must prove additionally that additionality defined as emissions reductions that are additional to what would have otherwise occurred. I was telling that, no, that in last class I was telling that. Now suppose you do a project which is implemented as business as usual, and then you have second scenario where you are taking corrective measures or you are adapting clean technology so that it is helping you to reduce the emission. And so this is calculated by using an approved methodology to subtract the estimated emissions of a given project from a hypothetical business as usual emission baseline. So if you do the project as business as usual, then suppose it generates 100 tons of carbon dioxide or any other gas, and but you are adopting a clean technology, so this is say emitting 80 tons of carbon, then you are basically reducing that 20 ton extra, that additionality. So you have to prove that this is how you are doing, and that will be certified emission reduction. So once registered, projects are then issued certified emission reductions with each CER, certified emission reduction, unit equal to a reduction of 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. And these CERs or offsets can be bought and used by developed countries to meet their Kyoto commitments. So even if the developed countries have not reduced the carbon emission in their own country, since they have paid for these CERs, which has happened in a developing country, that will also be considered as if the developed country has achieved this target. Okay. So no, what does it imply? That means the developed countries are not compromising on their quality of life. Their industrial activities are going on, and they are not able to reduce their pollution in their own country. But they are saying that, see, we are helping other countries, so we are paying for our carbon. So it's ultimately, no, you are paying for your carbon. So carbon trading is happening there. That's how. And companies can also purchase CERs to contribute towards their own emission reduction targets under mandatory emission trading schemes or voluntary schemes. So basically, when we say it is implemented at country level, it ultimately goes to the industry level. That a particular firm has to be given a target, and we have discussed all the process. How that carbon trading happens. That a nation will fix a target, that what is optimal pollution, and this is divided among say country. Okay, the nation will decide how many pollution rights will be sold, and then you go for auction. So that's how industries get a target, that each industry needs to reduce the carbon by a certain amount. And then if you are able to reduce it, that is fine. But if you are not able to reduce, then you can achieve it by paying somebody else in a developing country. Okay, so that's how CDM is operating. And so there are currently 3,000 registered projects delivering an average of 500 million CERs per year. So market has grown quite big, you can say. Although it can still grow, if all the countries adapt and pay for carbon, then we would have more CERs, and there would be more registered projects. But the developed countries are not, all developed countries are not showing much interest, particularly America, Canada, Australia, we see they don't show much interest. So the overwhelming demand for CERs come from the ETS, that is European Trading Scheme, and the world's largest functioning compliance target market, compliance carbon market. And between 2008 and 2010, European companies used 277 million CERs to meet their emission targets. So that means they did not reduce the carbon dioxide or emission. They paid to somebody else, and that's how they have achieved that. However, there are some concerns about the CDM, and particularly regarding the conduct of the project owners. Certain CDM projects are implicated in other issues like land rights issues and human rights abuse. So there are many private projects. You know that they get into a lot of controversies. In India also, we have seen. So CDM, although helping, we look at only one side, that it is helping us in reducing the pollution, but it might have certain other issues. Basically, forcibly acquisition of land. Then you are also suppose interfering the culture of a certain section of the society, or degrading the endemic species. So like that, projects might be impacted. And then looking at the geographical distribution of the CDM projects, over 80% of which originate in China and in India. So whatever European countries have sold all those CERs, 80% has come to India and China. And so it questions the ability of the CDM to drive broad engagement with sustainable development across all developing countries. And it is also impossible to prove the additionality of a project in comparison to a hypothetical baseline. So there are technical issues, and in fact, people can also say that it is basically proving the pollution heaven hypothesis, that the developed countries are now shifting the responsibilities to the developing countries. So you are paying for it. So you can say that no, you are paying money, so you stay in. Okay, so you have the responsibility, and we are not going to reduce the pollution because that may affect their own economy. And this is the case that we have discussed, that India's first CDM project to earn 50 lakh through carbon credits, 3 eco-friendly projects that mitigated 1.7 lakh ton of carbon. So this is Indore project, biomethanation plant at Kabid Kherdi. So here basically all the OS steps that is used to generate gas, and this is used in the city buses, and because of which emission of CO2 is controlled, by which we are helping the nation in keeping the limit of carbon emission, and this is helping India in carbon trading globally. So yeah, this is how the clean development mechanism is functioning. Anyway, so this is actually the broad idea of the CDM, and there are certain basically rules and regulations that we have discussed, and yeah, so that's all. So could you get some sense? No, of course, many rules and regulations, but the broader idea is that no, we had studying from the international negotiations, how we came to Kyoto Protocol and how countries have again withdrawn, but still European Union is doing some trading, and uh, India and China are the major beneficiaries because they have implemented certain projects. They have got all the benefits, and developed countries, particularly bigger countries like America and Canada, they have not actually shown much responsibility. So that is how the CDM is working. Okay, so with this, okay, should we have, if there is any comment or suggestion or anything that we can discuss, or we'll go to the informal regulation?
Sir, is there any like payment or some sort of penalty that they have to pay if they cannot meet the regulations?
Penalty on whom?
Sir, all the countries like
No,
they,
no, there is no penalty. That
there's no
is,
penalty.
yeah, these are all voluntary,
Okay.
and see, you can also think about the politics. Politics in the sense, not really politics. These are all sovereign nations, right? So these are all voluntary, compliance that we are making, or voluntary agreements. So we are making a commitment to do this, but then if you fail to do, then nothing can happen. And that is why sometimes it is discussed that UN is basically a toothless organization, okay? And it only gives advices, and it only persuades the country that you do this, do that, but then it is not able to really impose, and that is also quite obvious because all the countries are sovereign nations. So who will impose on somebody else? Okay? And now UN is not the cow panchayat, okay, that it can put a penalty in one form or other. So, and see, that can happen only if the developed countries make commitments, and we all see that the developed countries themselves are not basically doing anything, because as we have said, in fact, when we were discussing the diagram yesterday to derive the optimal level of pollution, basically the cost of abatement, the marginal cost of abatement is very high. Okay, that so you have to shut down industries, then that will lead to loss of the job, then slow down in the economic growth, that will reduce your poverty alleviation speed, your tax collection will go down. So many things are there. Okay, so it's not easy actually. Okay, so uh, only way we can see is that you have to, if all of us can reduce our demands, things can definitely solve. Basically, we can achieve some solution. But I don't know whether we can really do that. Say people who live in Delhi, now they are in a trap. Now you cannot live near to your office. That's why you have to travel. Now for traveling, okay, you all can use metro, but the metro is also not sufficient because you cannot reach on time. Of course, metro has become a lifeline, but still, many people still use their own vehicle because they think that they can reach their office on time. Okay, so now even if you use odd and even number, people are not going to really obey that. Okay, we have actually done that, but then that has not really helped. People bought more cars, having one odd number and even number cars. So similarly, industries or anything that we can say that we are all in a trap. And so reducing your demand or consumption, that means we all have to go back to our villages, then live with whatever minimum resources are available with us. So some people are doing it. In fact, now some people after retirement are not living in Delhi. They are going back to their own state, and even some people are also willing to go back to their villages. And in fact, you would be surprised to know in India, Kerala would be probably the only state where there is not much pressure to live in cities. They prefer to go back to their own village every day. They commute to their office. Then there are of course two reasons behind it. Uh, the land prices are very high in Kerala, so you cannot buy a piece of land in say capital city. Okay, that is one reason, because the population density is highest. Okay, I think Bihar probably has the highest, and Kerala has the second or third highest, because the mostly dense population states are Bihar, West Bengal, and Kerala. And among these three countries, Kerala has a very high land price, so people cannot stay in Delhi. And the other reason is also that there is good infrastructure available in the villages. Okay, and then so it all, and public transportation system is also good, so you can all go back to your village. So suppose good health and education is available in your village, then why do you want to stay in city? Okay, so okay, for your job opportunity, you want to go to city and you go to office and then come back. Say I don't know how Aditya's family is doing, but then mostly it happens people live in Noida because they cannot buy a house in the core part of the Delhi. So they take a house and they commute from Noida to the workplace. Okay, and but anyway, that pollution is not actually basically coming down. And so if you really think how to solve this pollution problem, it's very difficult. We all need to bring a structural change, and in fact, particularly in economics, we are basically going against the economic policies. Okay? Because the core neoclassical economics tells us that more demand means more growth. Now in environmental economics, we are saying to reduce your demand. Okay? And when you reduce your demand, your economic growth actually will go down. Okay, then some other people say that no, even if you go for green growth, you can still achieve higher high growth. Green growth means what? That the energy should be green energy, and similarly the consumption should be responsible consumption. But when it comes to the green energy, people have also been quite skeptical about the concept of green energy, because no energy is really green. Be it solar energy, be it nuclear energy, everything is not really green. It has a lot of environmental impact. For example, in case of solar energy, we say that it is renewable and it is not causing any emission. But what about the solar panels? Okay, so the production of solar panel itself is quite polluting. Okay? And the life of the solar panel is not infinite. So again and again, you have to get solar panels. And again, so the raw materials that you need for solar energy is equally polluting. Similarly, nuclear energy, the nuclear waste that we generate is quite dangerous. Okay? And so how to store those energy, and if there will be disaster, what will be the problem? So then hydropower, you see that most of the hydropower projects are constructed in forests. So when you make a big dam, you will see that lot of land gets submerged, lot of forests are destroyed, and so environmental clearances are also not given because of this. And so now, how do we address this problem? So green growth is really not possible. Yeah, and you have to probably reduce your consumptions, and that's it. Some people are talking about degrowth. Now we have achieved enough growth, and whatever wealth that has been created on this planet is sufficient for meeting the need of everyone, isn't it? Even I am fully convinced on this, because imagine if Mukesh Ambani distributes all his income, okay, and all the rich people, whatever wealth they are possessing, if that can be distributed equally, then all humans can fulfill their basic needs, and they can all live a decent life. Okay, so the inequality might be also causing a lot of environmental pollution. So think about Mukesh Ambani's house. How much energy is required for maintaining that house. Because that is a self-sufficient house, everything is available in the house, so they need not avail any service from the market. Okay. So it's a big dilemma that whenever we talk about energy issue or the environmental issue, how to achieve this target, it's difficult. Okay. And so we have not yet developed. We have already discussed sustainable development concept or not? No, we have not. Okay, we have not gone into that, right? Okay, fine. So, uh, yeah, then we'll stop here, and